Welcome back, fellow adventurers, to the Frog God Games YouTube channel. I am Ben Barsh, your host, guide, and dungeon master through anything and everything Frog God media. So, back to Swords and Wizardry 101. We are many episodes into this series, and I have been running it as sort of like a podcast. It's more long form, 20 minutes plus episodes. As detailed, or I think I mentioned in other videos that I'm trying to keep it around 20 to 30 minutes. I feel like when I talk for 45 minutes, I'm just not as sharp towards the ends. And that way, there is, it's just chopped up more and better and sectioned off better. So that there's like 7 different topics in a video, mainly just one topic, 1 to 2 topics if they go together. And we are in the referee section now of Swords and Wizardry 101. Hello, I'm on the webcam today because it's just easier to record this on a webcam. And you guys know that I do run it long form podcast style, so most of the time I don't have the webcam, and this is just like a trial episode to see if you guys want the visual of me gesticulating and all of this attached to the video. So I know a lot of people just listen to it as they're doing things like a podcast, but if you just like the video, just go ahead and let me know in the comments section down below. So we're talking about refereeing role-playing games now. So the rules that are set out for referees are just guidelines. If you want to stick to them by law, you're more than welcome to. No one's going to stop you from doing that. And as we've talked about multiple times, the referee has last say. What mechanic works, what rule is in the game, and so on and so forth. We recommend for beginning referees, try to stick to the rules, so that way you learn them. And then if you don't like something or it doesn't work for your game, for your table, or you have all of you come up with a better thing that works for you, just throw that in. There's nothing wrong with changing up rules. The beauty of role-playing games is it's not strict. It is not, overseen by a computer or an AI, or it's not a video game. There are certain boundaries within video games and board games per se. With role-playing games, the world is quite literally your oyster. It's a sandbox. You can do whatever you want in this sandbox. Build whatever you want, destroy whatever you want, and that goes for rules as well. So that's an important note. Do whatever you want with the rules. But make sure that, in my opinion, here's a little bit of my advice. As you guys know, I like to throw in, just find what works the best for your group. If they're not having fun, it's going to be tough to have, if like one person isn't having fun because they're not enjoying it, try to find a compromise or maybe hear them out. And if your players are detached from the game because they don't like how it's being ran, you're going to have less fun. I guarantee. Because I've been there before when I thought it best to be a little bit more strict with rules, there was a session where it was just awkward, because I just kept having to say no because I put too many rules in, and then I got more open as a referee. But nonetheless, we're gonna go ahead and start the refereeing sections of Swords and Wizardry, and who is a beautiful art piece. Looks like they're going into some like pyramid dungeon thing. Very nice. Looks like a desert to me. Sun, you got a little. This kind of looks like I can't think of the word. Moving on. It just looks like a desert town. So now we're on designing the adventure. So the adventure is basically the setting for the game. And for the adventure, for the players, this is the story that they're going to play through. Now, a much more advanced referee is going to be able to come up with a story on their own or on the spot. When newer referees, maybe you're not quite there yet. You don't really know what to do. Well, not to like plug or sell you on too many things, but Frog God Games does obviously have a plethora of adventures and campaign books for the Swords and Wizardry system. Being that this is Frog God Games, primary RPG system where we put time into. I'm going to go over some design tips for adventures if you would like to create your own. I'm also going to give my personal advice. So even if you are a veteran campaign runner, You might learn something, or I might solidify something that you already do. And I'm going to call on my veterans to help us out in the comments. Give some tips for designing an adventure, things that you use, little cheat codes that you like to do. And overall, the Tome of Adventure designed by Frog God Games. This is going to be linked in the description with the Swords and Wizardry PDF, which is free, as we know. This PDF I'm looking at is absolutely free on the Frog God site. Go down in the description and download it. The Tome of Adventure Design is the premier adventure design book that I have ever found. I believe it to be extensively helpful, written by Matt Finch, and it's just excellent. So if you guys have titles that you like from Swords and Wizardry, go ahead and leave them in the comments. But today I'm going to talk about designing the dungeon. And the dungeon is in my opinion, where a majority of the adventuring happens in old school gaming. The dungeon is a classic staple of adventuring. You leave town, you head out for a dungeon that's filled with gold, filled with treasure, but there's some evil wizard that's, keeping it hostage there. You got to go get it. There's a multitude of themes that can be put into dungeon adventure. The quest, you're given an object that you have to go fetch in a dungeon and return. There's voyage and return, where there's some knowledge that you have to go find, which will make your character better. But it's being held hostage by a necromancer who's using it for the dark arts. So there's many different campaign hooks that you can throw at your players. But before you do that, we want to design our dungeon. Or our adventure. I'm just going to use dungeon specifically here, especially because Swords and Wizardry does it. But this could easily be a temple. It could easily be a city, urban adventure. It could easily be really any of these different things. A cave, We're just going to say dungeon for lack of a better term here. So there's a couple things that you want to do. You first off want to think of the idea that you are going to be adventuring into. Is this an old dungeon? Is it built by dwarves? Is it built by elves? Is it more elegant? Is it got a rugged feel to it? So think of the history of the dungeon and then how it came to be as it is today. And then where I like to start is with mapping. I like to draw the map of the dungeon, and then I like to go in and attack and fill it up. So as you can see here, this is like a 3D view, or it's really 2D, but this is like a level view of a dungeon. So as you can see, there's some sort of ruin where you enter in the dungeon, and then you go down by levels all the way to the bottom, or the big bad, the great dome in this case. And each level can be unique, or it can all be part of this living ecosystem that is actively working against the PCs or the players. The thing that isn't detailed here that I always like to add is on the low level, add a secret exit. Add a secret exit that goes up to the top. That's really, there's really no way the players will find it at the top, but if they're, it's just an excuse for the big bad to not have to go through the entire dungeon every time they come into the dungeon. It's like a secret entrance or secret exit. So this is a sample dungeon map, and this is what I'm talking about mapping. So you want to have your different areas of the dungeon labeled out and mapped out. So as you can see, this is from Matt Finch's Ruins of Mithras Tower dungeon, and this was at this Mithras Tower was played at North Texas RPG Con. So as you can see, he maps out his dungeon. This is the building, or this is the level in which the players go and adventure through. The details that I like here is it's not boxy. The first adventure I wrote, my first book that I wrote, I asked my dad for some feedback on it, and he told me it was too boxy and to make the exterior not a literal square. And this is something I literally had never thought of, would be a problem, because it wasn't exactly, a square or rectangle, but more or less it was with the towers and the turrets. It was a castle. I really never thought about the fact that it probably wouldn't be designed that way. So I do like how it, random point there. But not pictured here is the entrance. So you want to start out with the entrance. In this case, it's the one right here. So this is room 1. When you make this map, and you make like mental notes of what's going to go in each room. What I like to do when I'm initially going through and mapping out my dungeon that I'm creating for my players to go through, I like to, we'll take 7 as an example. I don't know what this specifically is because I don't have the module or his campaign notes, but let's just say it's like a kitchen. I'll write in there kitchen, and then I'll move on to the next room, and then I'll say like dining room, and then I'll say like pantry, with an ulterior room. And then what I do is I open up a Word document, and I'm actually going to go ahead and there is an example map key here. Okay. So for example, room 1 is the stairs up. Now, if you are writing your own campaign for your players, this description can be whatever you want it to be. When personally, like I generally publish all my stuff, so when I do it, with the player description and the GM description first. But if you're doing it for yourself, you just need to have as many details as you need to explain to the players what they're walking into. So stairs lead down from this room to the first level and continue downward to, if you want to use level numbers or names, then you can. Or if, say it continues downward to the study, then you can say to the players the study. So this is kind of how you want to key your maps, because it'll make it easier for you when you present the map for your party. You draw it out as you go. And then you have your notes in front of you. So they walk into room 1 and you say, okay, you just came up from the stairs. This seems like more of an entrance hall. There's cobwebs, all hanging from the walls. There's an old rusted chandelier that seems to have maintained its beautiful grace over the years. However, you can very obviously tell that there is no life present in this room and has not been present for a very long time. You say something like that. And then that doesn't mean that's all to that room. Perhaps there's a trap in the room. If you take a wrong step, there's a little, maybe there's a tripwire, or maybe there is a false step that if you step on it, the chandelier comes crashing down. That's when your players go and investigate into the chamber. And, perhaps they say something like, okay, well, I'd like to look around. Is there dust on the ground? Is there any tracks that have recently been here? Or I'd like to check for traps, and then their character spends the next 10 or 15 minutes investigating. Perhaps you ask them to be more specific and say, where exactly are you checking? And then they say, oh, the chandelier looks off. I'm going to do something with that. That's kind of when, the endless possibilities start beginning, because you present them a room or an encounter, and then it becomes their problem to solve it. And if you want to, you can kind of leave it open-ended. And, if you're good at thinking on your feet, perhaps you really don't even have a solution to the problem. But if you like their solution enough, and perhaps maybe if they roll high enough, you let it be solved. It's just an idea. Not everyone does that. But I also real quick want to divert back to the mapping. Here's a pretty good key for, just remembering for yourself what things are. So, we have doors, we have double doors, secret doors, which are my favorite. Make sure you put secret doors in your adventure. Concealed doors, one-way doors, false doors that don't even lead anywhere. Revolving doors, which can be fun to be trapped. An archway or a window, a one-way secret door. Portcullis. Portcullises are fun because then they have to roll strength check to bend bars. Bend bars doesn't really happen a lot. Bend bars sounds like Ben Barsh. I'm just going to throw that out there. Ceiling or trap door, floor trap door, sinkhole, chasm. So basically these are just little inspiration tips to fill your dungeon with. I don't think it's noted. It's not. But I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. You see this little star right here? That usually delineates some sort of statue or special item that wouldn't be in another room. Generally, I've seen them as statues or unique items that are placed in the room. So that's always good. So then, yeah, you just go ahead and you fill all your rooms. The goblet targetry room. It's a large 4 collapse in the southwest corner. The room leads open to room 4, and there's goblin archers. And then you always want to say what monsters are in there and if there's any treasure in there so you don't forget. I've done this before. I've done this before where I made up this small little dungeon. It's like a tomb of a old warrior who dabbled in necrotic energy. And his last living deed was he stole a relic from a noble family. The noble family then pays you to go get it back from his dungeon tomb. So you go into the dungeon tomb, and I was playtesting with my players, or my group, and I completely forgot to put treasure. It was like the last thing I thought of. I don't know why. They went through this entire dungeon, and then they got to the end, and they're like, is all the treasure in the crypt room? Because we haven't found anything mysteriously in this tomb of this great warrior who most likely had many battle treasures. And I was like, yeah, it's all in the chamber. What are you talking about? Of course he wouldn't have it scattered around. And then I had to open up my book real quick and, flip around to the treasure section and be like, there's 1,000 gold pieces and 2,000 silver. So make sure you're filling it as you go. We'll get in a little bit later of magic items and gold, currency and all that kind of stuff to fill it with. Oh, actually, we do have some symbols here. Yep, the star is used for statue. I thought I remembered that correctly. Ladders, we have waters, pools, steps, fireplaces, cave-ins. We have all these things are in here for you. That if anything else, if you don't even want to, I would mark them so you remember they're there when you're playing. But this is inspiration right here. I mean, if you feel like there's something missing from your dungeon, some elements that you. Some real life elements that probably would be there, like fountains and wells and altars and and beds and all this kind of stuff. I highly recommend checking this out because it's a good way of inspiration. Here's another example of a dungeon. This is from Bill Webb's Rapidathic, well known Rapidathic. So as you can see, there's just many different levels, many different things going on. And they can connect in weird ways with little secret chambers that come out from a lake. That's got to be a lake, and then a pool that goes down into this other room, and then you have to find a way to hoist yourself up and over into the next room. So there's really countless things you can do with dungeons, and it's really up to you to mix and match things. Something I recommend for new players to do. Most of us have some experience with fantasy in one way or another. So if you're playing in a home game, there's nothing wrong with borrowing from another fantasy genre and making a dungeon out of it. Perhaps you play like World of Warcraft or something, and you really like a dungeon for World of Warcraft. For my WoW players, maybe you do the Dead Mines. Very low level adventure, some goblins in it, an ogre, maybe a goblin mech guy who likes to fight with different engineering stuff. Just find inspiration for dungeons in the games you play. Like Skyrim's another big one. For film, you can do like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. Find inspiration for that and then put your own twist on it and present that to your group. If not, it'll be a fun time. So this starts to detail the dungeon level and then how many creatures should be in your dungeon. And the important thing to notice here is the challenge level. So the original game doesn't, OD&D doesn't really specify the challenge level, but the challenge level is sort of like the level of challenge per se that you can present to your group. So if we want a certain challenge level, we just have to combine that level of monster to be able to find it. And generally, the challenge level is going to correlate with the level of the chamber. So say you come up on the first level of the dungeon, there's most likely going to be an easier ride on the first level than there is like the 10th level of the dungeon. That's usually reserved for like big bad guys. Whereas like the beginning, you kind of ease their way in. You want to rough them up a little bit because they don't want to. You don't want to send your players into a final boss battle with their full hit points or with their full spell slots. You do want to be roughed up a little bit to make that boss fight even a little bit more challenging. That's going to end up on, like, let's say level 10, for example. So that part will come together a little bit when we start talking about monsters. A little bit later in the series. So that talks about dungeon adventure. Another fun thing to do is wilderness adventure. And I'm coming up on 19 minutes, so I will save wilderness adventure for the next session. And I'll just talk about dungeons a little bit more as well. So if you aren't confident in your ability to stock a dungeon, you can just go ahead and use this list. And you're going to want to put as many as your players can handle. So how I was talking about, you generally want to keep the challenge level to correlate with the level of the dungeon floor as they go down, make it harder as they go down, basically. And I'll go over real quick Oh, dragons, a dragon encounter table. That's always fun. So this has to do with monster level, which is a little bit later in the book, but I will get there. I will talk to it. So, you know, the thing with monsters is they have hit dice. So the number of hit dice is a D8 rolled to determine the creature's hit points. So, for example, there's a giant ant warrior. That's 3 hit dice. So they're going to have 3d8 hit points, and then their armor class and so on and so forth. So they're like challenge level 3 monster. They're not that easy, but they're not that hard. You know, you'll most likely be able to take them on with, you know, a good party of level 2s, maybe level 3s. You know, if you have a good players at level 1, they could probably take on one of them themselves. But they're going to get roughed up a little bit because you want to look at their attacks and how hard it is to hit them. So they're going to do 1d6 and then poison. So 2d6 of damage. So you basically, with that, since it has the poison, you maybe want to throw it at them around level 2 or 3. But we'll talk more about monsters later on. If you want to go ahead and look it over and you want to stock your dungeon now, you're more than welcome to. But if you're not confident in stocking your own dungeon, you can go ahead and fill the dungeon using this chart. So you can either roll on the chart, roll a d20 and see what you come up with, or you can just pick off the chart which works best for you and makes the most sense for your dungeon. Actually, we see worker giant ants coming in at challenge level 2. So I was close. I'm not sure if they're on the chart. Yeah, giant ants challenge level 4. So like the 4th layer of the dungeon, or 4th level players, depending on how you want to look at it and think about it. Because generally, as you go up in level, you'll find magic items that will be able to help you as well. So the fights won't just be as raw as player hitting monster. You know, you'll have magic, you'll have magical items, you'll have more spells, maybe some henchmen, hirelings to help you out. So that is basically the small rundown of how to design your own dungeon. So what I recommend always doing, again, I'll recap, make your map and then fill it with text. Because if you're drawing out your map and you say, oh, I don't like that, then you can restart. And at least you have an outline and a visual outline in your head of where to put things. So that's what I always recommend. That's sort of how I design adventure. Next section, we will talk about wilderness adventures, which are sort of like the counterpart to dungeons. Dungeons are generally a little bit more stagnant, where there's not as much openness. But when you're out in adventures, you'll encounter different monsters. You have a chance to get lost. There's a lot more things that can go terribly wrong inside of a wilderness adventure. So we'll get into that. We'll talk more about monsters and such next session. Terrains as well. And then after that, we will start getting into mass combat for the wars that you have. But those will be separate videos because they're very different from each other. Well, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate you supporting the Swords and Wizardry 101 series. There is some great feedback on it, and I appreciate it. Let me know if you like having the video. I don't know if you guys like me being here or you just want the disembodied voice. So let me know in the comment section down below. Download your free version of Swords and Wizardry 101, which is the complete book. It's the complete rule book. You get the PDF for free, and then if you want to buy the hardcover, it's there as well. While we're talking about things for the referee, the Tome of Adventure Design is perfect, so you can add that PDF to your cart. That one's not free, but if you do want to support Frog God Games in any way, that's a good way to do it, and because it benefits you a lot. At least I think it's a very beneficial thing. So subscribe if you are not already. We upload a ton of videos to the channel, at least like 2 a week of what we've been doing at least. Like the video, it helps me grow the channel, and like I said, comment tips for dungeoning, crafting a dungeon, or your favorite Swords and Wizardry product for people to buy and run themselves. Thank you so much for watching, and let's keep going on. Adventures worth winning.